Okay, thank you all for coming. We're so delighted to have Pooja Dhingra here, who is not just like, I know she's known for making amazing pastries and food and all of that, but she's also incredibly smart and sharp and has thought deeply about entrepreneurship, about business, what it means to be a success, and also dealt with, her share of setbacks. So I hope you will talk to her about that as well. She has a fantastic new book out, um, which it's called Coming Home, right? Am I right? Yes. And we're going to put a link to that in the comment box. So the way it works, ladies and gentlemen, is that I'm just going to ask the first question and then get out of your way. This is your AMA. If you can put your question in the comment box, and then that way we can call you in, in okay, I've lost the word, but basically, in the queue that you're in, and then we can call you and you can ask your own question and have your own conversation with Pooja. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question, and that is, so I saw your cookbook. I have ordered it actually because my daughter loves baking. She loves baking. She didn't inherit it from me. I'm allergic to the kitchen, so so I bought it for her because she really loves it. But I was thinking, I had this weird thought, as in like, I can understand like when you write any other kind of non-fiction book, you will think like, okay, this hasn't been covered, or here is an angle or a story that hasn't been told. How do you decide to write a cookbook? Like, how do you decide, okay, this is something that needs to be written, this is something that is valuable, that's useful. How do you come to that decision?
Wow, that's a very good question actually. So I've written about six books. This is my sixth book that's out now, and my dream was always, I grew up baking in India, and I grew up facing a lot of challenges baking in India because the internet wasn't what it was. I had a lot of cookbooks that I would refer to, and I wouldn't understand ingredients. So my first rule of writing cookbooks is that it has to be accessible, and everything in it, you should be able to read the recipes and go to your local kirana store and be able to buy amul butter and amul cream and then make those things, right? So that's my first step. And I think for most of the books, I feel like they come to me rather than I actually go and hunt and say what I should write about next, because the first one was just baking basics. The second one, I was going through a personal journey with my health and fitness. I was training for a marathon. I gave up sugar for 6 months, and so I came up with recipes without sugar, so that became the second book. And then the third book was just, I saw a demand for eggless baking, and that was one question that everybody asked me. So that's how eggless baking came about. The fourth and the fifth books are all like they're ebooks, and they just happened in lockdown. And it was about the cafe and the recipes we make at Low 15. And Coming Home actually is the most personal, and it's I just felt like I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted to tell my story through recipes that have shaped me as a chef, as who I am today. So that's how it just kind of, I follow the rhythm. The other day I was at my friend's my best friend's house, and she has a 2-year old, and she just handed me a storybook and said read to her. And she left me for half an hour, and I read this book called Giraffes Can't Dance. And at the end of it, I was like, oh my God, I love this. I want to write. My next book is going to be a children's storybook which revolves around baking. So, yeah, that's how it goes.
Oh wow! So I read I think one of the excerpts in Condé Nast's Traveler. I think there was an excerpt of your book, um, and I was fascinated by this. I think baking was always a challenge. You're right, for so many of us, because most Indian houses don't have ovens. It doesn't come standard with your house, right? I mean, even a microwave is a recent thing. In those days, you only had like basically your gas range, or a pressure cooker, or other things that are considered essential. And also today, yes, you have places like, food hall, and fancy places where you can go get fancy ingredients. But in those days, that honestly, there was, even in terms of flours and things like that, it was very hard to actually embrace baking in any big way. So I was wondering how you managed as a kid.
So I grew up with aunts and my mom being like, bakers. And in fact, my nanny used to tell me that she used to make cakes in pressure cookers.
Mm.
So I have like, and my mom used to have like, she would pick out all these recipes from old magazines. And she has like this book where in the lockdown, when I was cleaning stuff, I found her book from actually 1986, which is the year that I was born. And she has all these recipes of like, and she obviously had a banana bread recipe in there, and she had like basic brownies. So it was a lot of that, like just finding them in old recipes at the sides of boxes, and putting them all together. So I grew up in an environment where baking was very like, we did it every weekend. My mom actually had a small home business. So she was making chocolates and chocolate mousse, and she was very famous for her chocolate mousse. And she would make it, and I would take it to school every weekend. So I was a very loved child in school as well. And my teacher, I was always like an okay student, but I was very loved because I was the one who was bringing all the dessert every Monday to school. Yeah, so I actually grew up around it, and it just became part of our family. My mom's made most our birthday cakes. She would do this pineapple thing and this thumbs up cake and a bunch of things. So yeah, for me it was just second nature. It was not something that I had to think about. It was just always a part of my life.
So Akshita has a question. Akshita, you want to ask your question? Akshita?
Hey, Chef
Yeah.
Pooja.
Hello.
I want to ask that what was the first thing you baked that changed your entire baking life?
Oh, the first thing I baked that changed my baking life. So first thing I ever baked was a tray of brownies, and I talk about this a lot. It was with my aunt, and I was about 6 or 7, and like I was an impatient child. And one day she took me to the kitchen and said, "I'm going to make you make brownies." And I still remember the magic of just seeing regular ingredients turn into something so beautiful that got, like when it came out of the oven, and it was just butter, sugar, flour, eggs, chocolate, and now it was something that was so delicious. I think for me that was what kicked it off. But I think through the years, I think the macaron recipe is the one that really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and that was the hardest one to crack. So it goes from brownies to macarons.
Oh, macaroons. Yeah, they do look very hard to make, huh?
Yeah.
Because you have to get them exactly that texture and the taste. They're delicious, but
Yeah, and it's also like very technical, so from a skill perspective, for a pastry chef to make macarons is the hardest. And to make it in a place like Bombay where you have high humidity, that's a very tough one to crack. So, when I came back from Paris and I started making all these recipes in my home kitchen, it was disastrous. And it was a lot of like, wasting and not getting the right, feet, not getting cracks. So it was really complex, but we got it out. Now it's good.
oh, very good. Malika, you want to ask your question?
Hi, Pooja. Firstly, hi from me and my book, which is always at my bedside table. One of the books that's always there. Yesterday someone put up a picture on Instagram that you reposted, which had a picture of your Google Calendar, and I couldn't see any blank spaces there, and it gave me a mini heart attack. So I want to ask you, if at all, if you experience burnout, how do you deal with it?
That is a very good question. My life is now, pre-COVID was very different, and post-COVID is very different as well. I think pre-COVID it was always like, so if you go back to that picture, there are like Sundays are off, and like mornings, and 6:30 is usually when I clock out. But pre-pandemic, it was a constant, like it was exhausting, and I think that in March of last year was such a big turnaround for me as well, because I realized that this is not the life that I want to live, right? And now, yes, it's great to say it now that I've worked so hard for so many years to be able to say that, oh, I want to take time off. But as an entrepreneur, whenever you start a new business, it requires the first 3 years requires a lot of time and attention. And after that, I think you can start like planning your life and deciding. So post pandemic, I'm like, why is this on my calendar? Let's take it off. Let's take it off. Let's take it off. But it is still, our team is about 80 to 100 people. We have 5 stores. The business is growing. We're, doing a second round of funding now. So it's it's constant, right? So there's always something that requires my attention. I just try to make sure that when I'm in something, I'm giving it my whole attention and not kind of being distracted. This whole concept of multitasking, I realized I took a test 2 years ago, and I realized that I can't multitask. So I used to think that, oh, I'm a great multitasker. Turns out I can't, and that's switching tasks is not good. So what I try to do is just give myself enough time to finish the task at hand completely before doing too many other things. So that kind of helps. But yeah, I mean, right now, today, I am exhausted. It's been a rough couple of weeks. We've had the book, we've had a new store. It's Diwali and, festive season and all of that. So it's a lot. But how I feel better is I'm planning a trip to Paris next month. So I keep
Wow.
looking at pictures all day, and I'm like, okay, soon I'll be there. And then that tides me through this time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I really hear you on multitasking. I can't multitask at all. And actually, I found my productivity is terrible when I'm not an extreme detail person either. I can do like really difficult big tasks, but if you give me 100 details to take care of, I get incredibly frustrated and inefficient and angry and cranky and stressed out. Um, yeah, it's really good. Actually, I should take that test to figure out what kind of
Yeah, it was,
person I am.
somebody in the office just randomly came and said, "Oh, let's all do this test," because it's such a like badge of honor to say, "Oh, I multitask and I do so many things and all of that." And when I did the test, I'm like, "Oh, I'm horrible at this. Maybe I should make a switch and not do this and just give my whole attention to one task." Because when we say multitasking, we're actually switching tasks, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
running and listening to a podcast is multitasking. That's fine. But going from like doing one thing and taking your attention out and trying to do something else doesn't work.
Yeah. So Plessy is at the doctor's. He wants us to ask you the podcast you create, how do you link all the thinking that is found through it? Do you have some notebook process or something else to help you refer to all the info you generate? So maybe you should, maybe people who haven't heard your podcast, our No Sugarcoat, maybe you should first tell them about that and what your vision is there.
Sure. So,
Oh, just 1 second. Can someone put a link to her podcast as well so they can check it out?
so the podcast is called No Sugarcoat, and how it was born was that I was kind of getting tired of everyone just saying that, oh, your life is like a piece of cake and it's a cakewalk and everything's so easy. And I'm like, it's really not. This is what everyone sees in social media or in the media. It's like it's a small fraction of what I actually do at work. And I realized that a lot of people that have gained a lot of success, no one really talks to you about what happens once you get successful. Like, how do you deal with uh,
So,
failure? How do you deal with things after that? So the idea was just to kind of trace everyone's journeys in their own, in their successes, and kind of understand where they failed, what is hard for them, how do they cope with the day to day. So it started with just talking to the food community, a lot of chefs, restaurateurs, because this industry is really tough and no one really talks about how hard it really is. So it started from there, and then season 2 just came out, and season 2 was actually going to different entrepreneurs and getting their real story without like this, because I was so tired of this whole thing of like, oh, Pooja came back from Paris and got the macaron with her, and
so
I was like, yeah, it's also taken like 60 failed recipes, 16-hour work days, no social life, all of that. And I just wanted to be able to have those conversations. So that's how the podcast started. And to go back to the question of how do I tie everything in, I think I learned so much from each conversation and each guest. I think I'm like a sponge and I just absorb everything. And then I don't really, when I make a switch and I have a learning, then I have a diary and I put it down. And then every so often I'll go back to it and see when I'm struggling with something, I'll go back and refer to it. But on a day-to-day basis, I just feel like I kind of just make it part of my thinking and move on with it.
yeah, I think that's great that you have a diary and a journal. I keep thinking that I should too. Sarah actually has a question for you.
I think taking back from the pandemic itself, you went from like the Colaba Love 15 shutting to now the Juhu one opening. How the last 1 year would have been wild, right? In terms of just growing your
Wild.
business.
Wild.
How has it been?
It's been crazy, man. Like I last year in April, I cried for one whole month straight. I was in my parents. I lived with my parents last year. I moved out since, but it was in my bedroom. I had one corner where every day I would sit with my laptop and Excel sheets and try to make sense of this because the food business, like if you don't have money coming in, we didn't have any outside money. We're not a tech company that has a runway for many months. So we had like a month. I was like, okay, I can pay people for a month, I can pay rent for a month, I can pay all of that for a month. What happens after? And COVID wasn't going anywhere, and you didn't know anything last year, so it was really hard. So that one month was just, I had so many conversations with so many companies trying to sell low 15. I actually have a pro in my journal. I have a pros and cons list of keeping the company versus selling it. Like, what do you do? I spoke to a lawyer about, oh, if we have to file for insolvency, how does that work? So I've gone through that whole, the lowest low that I could, and really the darkest days, right? Like I would stay up till 3 crying, etc., etc. It was awful. And I listen to a lot of Oprah, who guides me in times like this. And I just decided after the first month that I was just going to focus on things that I could control and just focus on the next best thing. And I just took it from there. And I said, instead of being overwhelmed and think of this whole like, oh my God, I got to shut everything down. I said, what is the one thing I can do to make this better? And the one thing was like, okay, shut the savory part of the business because that's sucking most capital, that's sucking everything, shut that. So I went with that. And I was like, okay, what's the next best thing I can do? I said, okay, open delivery again and start with a small team. Next best thing, start this. And I just kind of followed that through. And yeah, we opened our juice store today. We opened Palladium. We opened a store in Palladium in the lockdown, in the middle of all this chaos. And now we're opening another store in South Bombay. So yeah, it's been quite a turnaround.
And what would you say is your one big learning from that whole kind of?
Mm, I just feel like it's for a long time, it was just to take it a day at a time and not to overthink, not to live in fear, because there was just so much fear every day, right? Like when you have a business, and it's not only me, I had like 100 people's livelihoods that depended on me. So there was a lot of that pressure as well, because this is when you work with someone that much, they kind of become family, and now you have to think of what happens there, etc. So I think for me, it was just like one was just focus on the next best thing and just take each day as it comes. And that was my mantra that's been my mantra for the last whole year.
Yeah, it's got to put one foot in front of the other.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I do know, like, the pandemic has been one of the hardest things about the pandemic was the employees, right? I mean, my friend Manu Chandra, who runs a bunch of restaurants, well, he did until recently. He's going in a full new direction, but he talked about how difficult that was. That sense of responsibility that you have to meet salaries, and that you have to farm. And if you don't meet salaries, that for people who work for you, it's not a small thing. It's
Exactly.
their entire livelihood. You may be okay, but they're not going to be okay.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm meeting Manu actually right after this.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Say hi to him.
Yeah, and for me that was very key, right? So I think what it did for my team and I was we became a different mindset, right? We became like super focused on just each month, and every month I would tell them this is the sales target for this month, and we meet this, and it's 100% salaries. We don't meet it, it's 90, it's 80, whatever, and we all work
Right.
together. And I mean, there's not even been one month that everyone has not gotten their 100% salaries. So for me, that was, in fact, a few months they even got a little bit of a bonus, etc. So I think it just changed us, the way we function, right? Because we were now a team with a mission. We were a team with really, instead of just like, yeah, well, it's happening, everything's going on. It was now like, we all need to survive together. And it just changed me as a leader, and it changed the team. And I have so much respect for them because of that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. You kind of have gone through the fire together, right?
Yeah.
That's really great. Neha has a question. Neha, would you like to ask your question, please? Neha? Is she on? Okay. Well, okay, I can ask it. Oh, she's having internet issues. She says, any advice you could like to give a budding home baker?
A budding home baker. I think I would say, um, the risk is so low when you're starting out small. So it's really like, don't be afraid. I think when you make things with, you have the ability to be very agile. You're not bound by, like today, if I have to make a menu change, it takes me 3 months, because you have to get the suppliers and the team aligned and this and that and this. When you're a small operation, like, the world is your oyster, you can do anything, right? So be really focused on who your audience is, what they really want, what is your niche. I think it's very important to identify what you're very good at, because the baking landscape has become super competitive. Like, I live in Bandra, and just in my street that I live in, there's like 8 bakeries, and we all are. And then everyone that I know that bakes from home makes excellent cakes. So it's always about, like, what is it that you bring to the table? Why should someone come to you? And I think that you're in a great position where you can experiment with not a lot of investment, right? And so just focus on the things that you can control, figure your niche out for yourself, find out a way to market to your friends and family first, and then grow from there. Because in the food business, word of mouth works more than anything else, right? Like, when I started Love 15, I only had my Facebook page. Like, I didn't have anything, right? I was 23, and I would be in the kitchen and I would be baking cakes, and I would take pictures and put them up on my Facebook page. And then the first order I ever had was actually a classmate of my brother's, who I had on my friends list, who saw this picture of this chocolate raspberry cake, and he's like, oh, can I order this? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I made it for him, and then he liked it. And then somebody who ate it at his home ordered the next one and the next one. So I think just focus on getting your product really right, and then making sure that enough people get to try it. I think that's a good place to start.
How would you see that landscape actually from the time you started with just a
So
Facebook and today, where there's Insta, there's so much, and everyone. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but everyone and their mother is big and has some kind of. I mean, it seems very, very.
Yeah,
It's like a boom of some kind, right?
No, I mean, it was so. Even when I started 12 years ago, it was a competitive landscape. There was a lot of people making cakes and chocolates from home. There weren't that many, like, shops there. We had Theo Bruma, and then we had the five-star hotel. So I came in at a time that was great. I think the timing was right because there was not too much else. But right now it is highly competitive, right? Like, and but the good thing is that we as Indians love our sweets, and there's always an occasion to celebrate, and there's always birthdays and anniversaries and weddings, and so I think there's enough room for most people. And I also feel like with dessert and things like that, it's all cyclical as well. People like one thing, then they move to the next. So it's I think it's kind of nice, but yeah, it's competitive as hell. So it just feels like, define what you're really good at and then focus on that instead of trying to do everything.
Sure. Simreen, you have a question, right?
Hi, Pooja. First of all, congratulations. And I just wanted to ask that which ingredient do you enjoy baking with the most? Like, baking is such a vast, like, you can bake with anything,
Can you
right?
guess?
Pardon?
Can you guess?
I don't know. I feel like it would be something sweet, not savory.
I am obsessed with chocolate. Obsessed. It's, when I was 8 or 9 years old, my parents took me to the Cadbury factory. And I think that was a highlight of my life, because I was 8 years old and they took me to this factory, and there was a room full of nutties. Like, there was like there was this whole room, and there were nutties falling from this machine, this contraption from the ceiling. And it was just, I was obsessed with it. And then I went and I moved to Switzerland, and I lived in Switzerland for 4 years. And there, I mean, even supermarket chocolate, like, I thought I was the greatest baker because everything I was making was excellent. But then I realized it was the quality of all the ingredients also that I was using. So I love baking with chocolate. It's actually it's cheating because half your work is already done. But another ingredient that I love working with is vanilla. I love vanilla beans, and I think that it's so underrated because people use vanilla to mask flavors and use it, for everything else. But I really just, when I get a really nice bean and you slit it open and you just add it in a cream or you add it in something else, it's just so aromatic and flavors lovely. And yeah, so I love vanilla and I love chocolate.
Are there any ingredients that are a challenge to source in India still?
So now it's getting a lot better, but say 10 years ago, everything was a challenge. So even to get good quality chocolate, to get full fat cream, cream cheese was an issue. Everything was an issue. Now you have suppliers and distributors for everything. But yeah, it's always, dairy has always been a little bit of a challenge, which I don't understand why. But now you're seeing a lot of local brands also get into the full fat cream and cream cheese, because otherwise you only have to buy the Philadelphia version of it.
And what about quality? You think the quality is improved?
Yes, I also think that because the demand has improved so much, there's some great Indian chocolate. There's some great like bean to bar, this whole underground scene of chocolate that's happening in India, which is great. And yeah, even the vanilla beans from Kerala and things are excellent. So we try to source as much as we can locally, and the things that we can't find, then we import.
And do you have to make some things inside your own kitchen? Like I know with Manuri, it's like, some things I have to make myself. I just can't go and buy.
Not for baking as such. I think
Mm.
we just get all the raw ingredients and then.
Oh, okay. So that's not a challenge there.
That's not a challenge, yeah.
Vani, you want to ask your question? She wants to know how you built your empire and what tips would you give her. So, do you want to be an empire builder, Vani?
Yeah, hi Pooja. First of all, I'm a huge fan. Really excited about your store in Juhu. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. But really, I am not a chef, but I love food. I love international cuisine, and I've been trying to do like a little project myself in the lockdown on Instagram, and about international food, and just to be able to expand more, to learn more about the space. I would love to be able to connect with more people like you who can really tell me about it, teach me about it. But I feel like it is just such an overwhelming space. And as someone who has done this like full journey of building this empire and being a content creator too, like what tips would you give to someone like me? How have you done it?
Oof, where do I start and take this? I mean, like I said, right? Like whenever anybody would ask me I've always been super ambitious. So you ask me what I wanted to do, I would say world domination, like not really knowing what that meant at all. Then slowly over the years, I kind of defined that, what I mean with Love 15. I think it's great to be ambitious. I just feel that you have to find something that you're truly passionate about, but also remember when it becomes your job, that separation of passion versus when you have to do it every single day. So it's great that you love international cuisine, but what do you want to do with it? First, start defining those things for yourself, like break down little goals for yourself. How far do you want to go? Do you want it to just be an Instagram page? Do you actually want to cook it? Do you want to sell it? In what format do you want to sell it? Which is your marketplace, etc. Like if you start just breaking down and asking yourself those questions, start distilling those thoughts a little by little, right? And don't get overwhelmed by the big picture. The big picture always overwhelms everyone. Break it down into baby steps. And like I said, just put like one step in front of each other, and then slowly you will get there. But I think that, so for me, like I didn't, people, the other day I did an interview with someone and I was called a content creator before chef, and I was like, oh, when did that happen? So for me, like posting on Instagram or like creating content, it is very second nature. It's very like, and it's very incidental to my day job. And when lockdown happened, I suddenly realized that now that I'm not doing what I'm truly passionate about, and I don't have much to talk about online either. Like I don't know if I want to share as much as what I was sharing. So I think it's important to kind of understand what your sweet spot is. What do you like sharing? It's great to bring your own personality out in what you do, right? It doesn't only have to be about the food that you're cooking, but what else can you add? And that's how you build connection with people. That's what people really, go for. That's at least my take. I don't know what more I can add to that. I hope that helped.
Is there a strong knit community amongst people in the business?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there wasn't about 10, 12 years ago, but when I moved back from Paris, Chef Kelvin, who was around as well, we kind of started this thing where every Monday, because all of us are free on Mondays and not on the weekend, we decided we would do Chef's Night every Monday, and it just became a thing where we would all meet and we would talk, and we have like a WhatsApp group with like 30, 40 of us. So it's really like a resource of like, oh, hey, I can't find this ingredient. Can you help me with this? I need to look for someone. So we're all like closely knit, and we all know each other. We all help each other, and I think that community building is key as well, right? Like, because you always know who you can reach out to and who can help you with everything.
It's not competitive. It's not.
I don't think at this stage it really is, because we're all friends. We all drink together. We eat together. We eat together. Everyone's good at what. I think it needs to come from a very secure place, right? Because everyone knows what they are good at, and then I don't think it's really super competitive.
So Neha has another question about trends. Neha?
I think she can't ask her questions.
Okay, so I will ask it for her. So she says, what's your take on trends like pull me up cake and stuff? I don't know what the pull me up cake is. And so I guess what is hot and happening, and do you think like,
So I'll try it, I'll try like the Dalgona coffee I tried it. I was like, okay, this is what my grandmom used to make for us in winters in Delhi. This is Dalgona coffee. Sure, we'll make it. And stuff like that. But, I feel like if a trend calls out to you, that's great. I do it for fun if I have to just, test it out. I've made one pull me up cake so far. That's about it. But overall, like, to me, that's not where I see my skill set. So I wouldn't kind of follow that. But if it's a flavor trend, why not, right? Like if there, you'll see like flavors will have their moments, right? That there'll be a time when everyone will be using matcha and everything. And then there'll be a surge of passion fruit. And then there'll be a surge of berries, and seasonality will come in and stuff like that. So those kind of things are great. But desserts in like, there was this horrific one of, this milkshake, this overload thing with, I don't even know, freak shakes they were called, yes. And I was like, that each shake is like 3,000 calories. Like, that's just not okay. So I would never make that.
Sanika has a very practical question, I think, which will have a big impact on her life. Sanika? Okay, I'll ask it for her. She's a hospitality grad, and next she wants to pursue a diploma in bakery, pastries. So, any suggestions where I can do so? How would it be pursuing from Lavon or SCP? I don't know.
So I actually get asked about schools a lot, but because I don't have any personal experience, I refrain from kind of suggesting one school over the other. But I would say that I personally have a lot of interns, and I've worked with a lot of people that have graduated from Lavon, and their skill sets are great. I also personally know the owners of Lavon, so it's a little bit conflict of interest. But I mean, it's a great school. I've taught there. I highly recommend it. I would say do a lot of research, speak to people that have graduated. What was life like for them in school? And then after that, was finding a job easy? How did the industry respect them? Was, try to go to people from that school and get information from them to make a more like, a concrete sort of decision. Is what I would suggest.
So you didn't get a degree, Pooja? You didn't get a degree in.
I did, but I studied at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, so I didn't do it in Bangalore.
Okay, and would you say that it's actually? Sorry, I think I'm interrupting because my thing is freezing in the middle. No, I guess do you think it's important to go to school and get that degree? Is it something that you could learn just starting at a restaurant and learning?
Sure. So, I mean, I think, my belief is that education is always great foundation. Not to say that to be a chef, you have to go to culinary school. I don't believe in that. I work with some great chefs here that have learned on the job. I just feel like you need to be determined enough to know which path you want to take, right? Like school will set the basis for you. You learn a lot of things that you won't have to struggle with once you start working in a professional kitchen. But my advice would definitely be, before you even decide that you want to be in a professional kitchen, to go do an internship or work in one, because what the idea of what you have, and baking cakes at home is fine, but when you actually move to a professional kitchen, no one prepares you for the amount of time, effort, how it affects you physically. Like it's a very physical job. So I feel like you can learn on the job, but definitely go to a professional kitchen, get some experience, and then decide whether you want to go to school or not.
Sarah has another question. Sarah?
Yeah. So when it comes to curating your menu, how do you go between like
Sarah?
trying and hello, can you hear me?
I actually
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can the rest of y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So when it comes to curating your menu, how do you go between like your hot faves, so say the red velvet or some of your macaroons, to like experimenting new things, like as a chef to being a business person?
That question that you asked, it is so basically all my menus, very unfairly or fairly to me, is things that I love to eat. Okay, so when I came back from Paris, when I decide to put a menu together, you're taught in school, you break it down, you have like something for everyone, etc., etc. But I saw that 80 to 90% of my menu was leaning towards chocolate. I was like, okay, I need to change this. And then I started changing things, and it happens, every 6 months we do a menu audit, and we look at things, and we kind of pull out the least performing menu items. And sometimes it sucks because it's something that I truly love, but then nobody's buying it. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep it as a limited edition, or I'll make it for myself. And my passion fruit macaroon, that is my biggest sort of, I love it, and it's my favorite thing to eat, but nobody else was buying it. So after a while, I was like, okay, I have to, think about my profitability here and take it off the menu. So I had to. So it's a tough battle there. So I would love to kind of have it, but I think experimenting and making it for myself is okay for now. But business has to go on, and we have to sell what people really want to buy.
That actually, so I have a question about that. What people want to buy. Now I have friends who are chefs and things like that. I actually spent 3 days behind the scenes at Olive in Bandra, actually, and did a piece for Open Magazine years ago. And it's really, so it's an interesting thing. So actually, the most interesting people I talk to are the waiters, more than anyone in the kitchen. I mean, in the kitchen were great, but the waiters who actually were customer facing. And he would have a thing of what he would suggest from the menu, having made some assessment of what kind of customer it was. And primarily, it was very much about Indians have a certain comfort zone about certain tastes they like. So they come to a place like Olive. So maybe an arrabbiata is an easier sort of entry into pasta for many Indians than, something a little more, like a risotto or a, high-end risotto, something a little more fancier. Do you have something similar with dessert where I would love to hear about that?
Yeah. That's actually great. That's a great question as well. And I think that, for us, like milk chocolate is a great like entrant. Milk chocolate would be that arrabbiata pasta. We always ask people their preferences, like, do you like something sweeter? Do you like something more bitter? And the team is trained to then kind of suggest things on the menu. But more often than not, and I know this from my parents and my friends, that we mostly like things sweeter. Like our own desserts, Indian desserts are heavily sugary. So dark chocolate and things that are a bit more unique, things that have a more like acidic, like lemon is still quite okay. But with the passion fruit, the problem was the minute anything is sour to our palate, you think it's gone bad. Like, khatta, it's gone bad. So that was the issue I faced with that. So we start with something really basic, and then you layer it with like, okay, do you like Nutella? Do you like hazelnuts? Do you like almonds? And then there's different variations that we can offer. But the basic chocolate cake that we have is made for, something that I always tell people that if you don't know what someone likes, get this for them, because they will love it.
Samreen has another question. Samreen, they're all fangirls, Pooja. Like, what can I say?
So I wanted to ask that how different is the baking scene in Paris and in India, and what were the challenges you faced after coming back from Paris?
Wow, yeah. The baking scene in Paris is like, it's on steroids, right? There's like every street has like 5 boulangeries, 5 patisseries, small ones, big ones, luxury ones. It's the categories go from local mom and pop to like super high-end luxury, and everything is good. I don't think I walked into any bakery and bought like a baguette or bought something that was bad. Like, there's variations of everything being good. So then, I always used to think about this when I was in school, and I was like, if everything is so good, what is setting them apart, right? Like, why would someone go? But then I realized that, French culture is also one that revolves deeply around the bakeries, the scene. So you wake up in the morning, on your way to work, you'll walk to your local, the one that's just by your street. You'll go to that boulangerie and you'll get a croissant and a coffee or a baguette, and that's, how you'd live. And when then you want to give someone something, you'll probably go to a La Durée, you'll go to something slightly more expensive, etc. So the pastry scene in Paris is just next level. I mean, the skill sets of the chefs there, they actually have a whole program where after you're 13, you can stop going to school and become an apprentice and go work in a kitchen. So a lot of the chefs there, they've entered kitchens at 30 years old, right? Like that's when they start. So their skill sets and their levels and the competitions that they do is just, again, on the next level. The quality of ingredients is just, the butter. I can go on for hours and hours on French butter. But yeah, just the basics, right? Like you have good butter, you have good chocolate, good flour. It's very difficult to go wrong. And then you have the weather and the temperature, right? So I went through all of that. I was in Paris for a year. I worked in a chocolate shop for 3 months. Amazing. I thought I was the best. I thought I was the greatest. And then I came back to India and I was like, my chocolate is like melted at room temperature here, right? So it was a lot of unlearning, a lot of figuring out what can I do with, the maida that I get here? What is the gluten content of this? How do I make this work in a cake? How do I get local chocolate? How do I get local ingredients? So for me, the challenges were one, ingredients, just sourcing them, figuring out how they work in recipes. All the recipes that I learned in school were pretty much pointless. Like I came back and I was like, I can't do this here because it won't work. So it was a lot about experimenting, finding things that I could use. And 10 years later, I mean, a lot of that has changed, but just like figuring all of that out. Just, you make a really good cake and it's mousse and it's everything, and you sell it from your store, and by the time someone takes it home, it's completely melted, disintegrated. So you have to like really, when you're building your recipes, even think about that travel time. How is it going to reach your customer? All of that. So those were challenges when I moved back.
Thank you so much. And just one more. Why Love 15? Why that specific name?
So so Paris has 20 different arrondissements or neighborhoods, and I lived in the 15th. And the 15th is where my school was. It's, the Eiffel Tower kind of straddles the 7th and the 15th. And for me, for 1 year, being a 21-year-old living in Paris, the 15th became my home, right? Like I started like the neighborhood cafes, the metro stops. It was a feeling. And when I came back, I was like, how do I get the same feeling that I had, from my home away from home here? I was like, how do I get people when they bite into a macaron or they walk into a store, they get the same feeling? So I started thinking of many different names, and my best ideas come to me when I'm on my treadmill. Strangely enough, I was running and thinking about sugar, which is why I will never lose weight. But I was on the treadmill and I was running, and suddenly I was like, okay, it has to be Paris. And then I started thinking about Paris's city code is 75. So my first idea was, oh, maybe I should call it 75 because it's easy to say, people will remember it. And then I was like, no, it's the 15th. You know, that's my neighborhood, and that's what I want people to feel. So that's where Love 15 came from.
I have a question about, you know, whether you've been, in a lot of chefs now in terms of other cuisines, are bringing in, for example, native Indian greens, native Indian ingredients, sort of really, bringing their roots into their cooking, and even into something that may be very continental. I mean, very French or very whatever, Italian. And I remember you talked about that a little bit in that excerpt as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about how you've done that.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting because when I was in Paris, I saw a lot of Japanese chefs very proud of their heritage, very proud of their culture, their ingredients. And I would go to a Japanese bakery and find like a matcha millefeuille, and I would find like all these, wasabi, sesame, and all these desserts. And I kind of started thinking, I was like, why haven't I seen any kind of, and I hate the word fusion, right? Like not like mashing kind of two desserts, but just using flavor components. So when I moved back, I did a lot of that research of what if I put chilies, like chopped up green chilies in this chocolate? What would that taste like? I love chai. I'm obsessed with chai. Feel like, what if I made a chai macaroon? And what would that taste like? What if I put like hazelnut and lemongrass in chai and then made that into something else, right? So I had a lot of fun playing around with it. We did a whole collection. Some of it went really bad. Like I tried to do something with kokum and I tried to do something with kala khatta, which was awful. And I really couldn't use it. But then I did stuff with like, the like the pan and the green chili and the sesame and, all those things worked out really well. So we've been doing it consistently. Like for every Diwali, our most popular macaroon flavor is it's inspired by the Kaju Katli, and it's because macaroons are almond based. It just works really well. And it's our like best-selling product, and it's on the menu now. So yeah, it's quite exciting.
And do you see yourself in terms of your ambition? And you're incredibly brilliant, you're talented, sky's the limit. You now see great Indian restaurants, high end in London, in York, around the world. Do we see Pooja Dhingra opening a patisserie in Paris or London or New York?
World domination, Lakshmi, world domination. I keep saying it to myself. I would love to. I mean, one of the dreams is to be able to imagine take Love 15 to Paris. That would be, great, and have that identity of, being from India, to the world. I really hope that I'm able to do that.
And where do you see that? It hasn't happened yet. I mean, I don't think there is a sort of Indian.
Not in the dessert space. A lot of restaurants, maybe some, but not that. You have your, small, but not any that I can think of and say that this is a made in India brand that's really global. Not any. If anyone can think of any.
Yeah, and even in those Indian restaurants that are very high end, the dessert menu is very standard, right? I mean, there doesn't seem to be much experimentation or introduction to like a a non-Indian audience about what.
Which is what I actually really, the folks behind Bombay Canteen and Bombay Sweet Shop are good friends of mine. And I think that they are doing a great job. And I think that if, really taking Indian identity to the world, I keep pushing them. And I said, you need to do this somewhere else as well, because that's where it will really have an impact. So I'm hoping at some point they do that also.
And have you seen that evolution in how we do Indian sweets? I mean, other things have kind of moved. I mean, not fusion cuisine, like not bringing Indian ingredients into, but Indian sweets themselves, have they kind of stagnated where they taste exactly the same as they did 20 years ago, or have they moved, or do you see
so much
interesting
comfort in that, right? Like when I want a gulab jamun, I want a gulab jamun, But I do see a lot of shift happening in that space as well. So you have your traditional mithai, you have your traditional, you'll go to certain places to eat certain things, and that remains the same. And people go there for that nostalgia and for that. But then also there's this whole evolution of Indian sweets now. There are so many brands and so many that are doing a modern Indian take on mithai, that are doing, modern barfis, etc., etc. While I think that's, it's delicious and it's great, but I don't think for me personally, like when I want to eat peda, I want to eat peda, and I want, I want that. So I don't know how everybody else views it, but I think there's enough space for both.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old fashioned that way. I want my barfi to taste like a barfi and not have strange things in it. But on the other hand, maybe that's what kind of limits. There's much more creativity if you're doing Western desserts, and there's more room from your customer for you to experiment.
Which is why I think
than if you're doing.
Yeah, which is why I think this would do really well outside of India. Because then you're new palette and things.
And especially because, and also, probably would have to be less sweet, because I know the one thing that all my American friends would complain about is like, why is it so sweet? Why is it so sweet?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what is your next big thing that you're looking forward to? What is, when Pooja Dhingra looks towards the future, what's her big, and it's done. You reopened in a great new location. So that's tick.
I'm not
book is out, tick. So
I mean, this is like I said, I'm extremely ambitious. So I feel like I haven't scratched the surface of where I want to go with this yet. We have a big mission where we say that we want Low 15 to be in every pantry, in every home in the country. So we're working on like product ranges, that we can scale, that we can get to. So when I look at that overarching sort of mission over the next like decade or so, that's, I feel like you have to have a dream that kind of scares you a little bit. So that scares me a little bit because it's overwhelming, but it's also like exciting because I'm like, okay, I'm working towards that. So the next step is we have a whole range of, packaged goodies that I've been working on for years that's launching in December. And then hoping that with that we can go to other cities and scale, and then maybe different countries. So I don't know. I just want to keep doing. I want to work with some really talented people. I enjoy the whole process of creation. So as long as I get to do all these things on a day-to-day basis, then eventually one day you're like, oh, it's a big empire now, and that's how it happens.
Malika has a question. She says, Malika, she wants to know if you are bringing back table number 13.
Yeah, two things. One is, when is Pan India macaron delivery starting, and table number 13?
So Pan India delivery will actually start after Diwali. We've been working on it, so hopefully soon.
Awesome.
Table number 13, not anytime soon. That was something Chef Pablo did, and it was, something that we did at the cafe, and it was savory and sweet, and now we've eliminated savory completely. But maybe when Pablo's back, he's probably going to be on vacation soon if things settle down. So we'll probably do one pop-up, and I'll let you
forward.
Great. And I think someone wanted to know, what's your favorite mithai, Indian mithai? Akshita.
I love, there's so many things I love. I love Kaju Katli. Now is the season. I'll be eating Kaju Katli all the time. I love milk cake. I love that. I love kulfi. I love gulab jamun. My mom makes amazing sevia and gajar ka halwa. I love that. You see, it's a problem. It's a real problem.
Well, it is wonderful to have you here tonight, Pooja. And thank you so much for all of you for asking wonderful questions. And like I said, as you can see, I have a team of fangirls. Lots and lots of questions for you, and probably keep you here forever. But it's time to let you go. Thank you so much for making time. And thank you everybody for being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
Bye. 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 Bye.